We don't realize that commitment is like pregnancy. You either are or you aren't.
Right. How has the rise of cohabitation impacted our relationships? Is it causing more divorce, or is it just a way for people to see if they really want to be in a long-term relationship and that's a good thing?
Well, I'm not so sure it's a good thing. I think that one of the problems that we're having is that you can't have a trial commitment. So it gives this sense that you could try on commitment, but you can't.
Right.
You know, when I wrote Kaizen for Couples, I talk about the hokey-pokey relationship that is sort of prevalent these days. You've got one foot in and one foot out, and that's what it's all about. And then you have your team on the outside saying, well, you know, you could just get a divorce, try it out.
Right.
And so we don't have that level of commitment. So I think that it's doing us a disservice, but if you want to have the cohabitation, I have no problem with it. I don't care if it's an institutional issue or if it's a relational necessity, but if you're going to do it, go into it committed.
Right.
Don't go in to try it on.
Well, some research suggests that when people do move in, and this is different obviously for every couple, but that when the majority of people move in together as a couple, that some level of commitment starts because they're living together and they're creating that life together. There's some other trends. I think that in America, it turns out that people tend to move in a little faster than they do in other countries, and we have a higher rate of cohabitation not working out. So, for example, 3 months or maybe 6 months or something like that. And that is really fast. I mean, you don't know someone so very well. Then to move in without the bigger commitment of marriage, things get real dicey. Additionally, there is some information about, in our country, economics being a factor sometimes for people to move in. It's not so much that they really have decided, hey, I might want to live with this person for a long time and check out this marriage, but it's economic.
Have to pay too high rents.
Right, and also that education levels, people who are more educated tend to move in together a little bit later. Sometimes that's also tied into economics. They can afford their own rents more easily. So these all contribute to
so a number of factors that are kind of causing this phenomenon.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it's not probably a good thing would mean something like this, that the divorce rate of couples who cohabitate and marry is, I think, 50% higher than the divorce rate of people who don't cohabitate and marry. So that the trial marriage is just an illusion. It doesn't do that. And Helen and I are always trying to figure out what's the dynamic that leads to that. And what we've arrived at is that it's sort of like what you just said, ambivalence. That our brains cannot work with ambivalence. You have to commit. Then the brain knows what to do. We're committed. You may not know what to do, but at least, in terms of making the marriage better, but at least you are in the ring together.
Right.
But if you're not sure you want to be in the ring, so you go in the ring, but you're not sure you want to be there, so you don't make the commitment, whatever conflicts there are become increased by the
because you think, well, you always think, well, I
can always exit.
Yeah, I can always exit. And so you never necessarily put in the kind of effort to say, how do I see this through? How do I do the right thing if you have one foot out the door?
We don't realize that commitment is like pregnancy. You either are or you aren't.
Right. Well, exactly, yes.
There aren't degrees of commitment and there aren't degrees of pregnancy. And we have to really get that.
But the fact is, how we treat someone else is how we treat ourselves.
Right.
And if we are not reliable for someone else, if we can't come through for someone else through thick and through thin, you often can't come through for your own self. Our lower brain doesn't distinguish between an action to someone else and an action to ourselves. And so if we care about our well-being, we will learn to be able to be reliable for someone else, and hang in there and become trustworthy through thick and through thin.
Well, one thing that came up for me is I'm worried about the folks at home who may feel alienated by this conversation of, oh, well, I'm cohabitating right now with someone. What does that mean for me? And I think it's important to just reiterate that it is about commitment and not necessarily marriage, although marriage helps because there's something about the sealing of vows and the ceremony of it. But that commitment piece is really the important part.
And we're not judging it. We're just saying if you pour a glass of water over it, it's going to hit the floor. So there's certain reality dynamics in cohabitation that arise because of the nature of cohabitation that don't arise when you're committed in a marriage. That's just science rather than a judgment.
So I think the key here is that cohabitating is indeed on the rise, and that in going into a cohabitating relationship or arrangement, that you really have to know what you're going in it for. If it's going in it to see, that can be dangerous, that you ultimately really need to be committed for it to work, especially in terms of marriage, or chances are it's not going to work in the long run.